Hello and welcome to the talk series on Guiding Lights by Zaggle. I'm Paiel Gandhi Hoon, your host, bringing you up and close for riveting conversations with some of the brightest and leading HR leaders. I have someone with me who is a thorough professional with a high cultural quotient and context, an influencer, and a catalyst. His key strength is his sense of a balanced approach and breadth of perspective. He has a diverse range of experience of close to 3.5 decades, including certain different experiences there in pharmaceutical manufacturing, FMCG, across India, Europe, US, Middle East, APAC, Switzerland, and Colombo. He specializes in strategic business partnering to deliver organizational outcomes and is driven by a passion for people and performance in terms of organizational efficiency and talent management. His specific areas of interest lie in personal growth, leadership development, learning, and employee relations. On that note, I'd like to welcome Sameer Nagarajan, Global President, Human Resources at Cadila Pharmaceutical Limited, to be the guiding light today. Welcome, Sameer.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Payal, and I've really been looking forward to our conversation today. It's a pleasure to be here and it's a pleasure to be speaking with you and our guests as well. Thank you.
Likewise, thank you, Sameer. So, Sameer, you've had an immersive stint in HR, and what would be your attribute? What would you attribute your success to in this function? That's my first question to you. And what are the qualities that have helped you decode and leverage regional and global cultures at work?
That's a very interesting question, and when I look back on my career, as you said, it's going to be 34 years in about a month from now. I think where I started off in HR, actually my when I completed my 12th, I actually did a BCom, wanted to be an accountant, and very proud to say that I can still do a trial balance and a P&L account and interpret ratios and so on, but I did realize somewhere that my heart was not in it. I was good at it, but my heart was not in it, so I reflected a bit and then decided to do an MBA in HR, and having got into XLRI Jamshedpur, I think that was the first big change, the first big step in, I think, getting a grounding in HR. It was so intellectually stimulating and rich, and there were so many companies I visited and so many things that I did, that at the end of it, I really enjoyed the idea of working in industry, and I think that was the first big change, the first big step forward in getting into HR. And the first 4 or 5 years, I think, were very experimental. I was doing a lot of things. I worked in a factory for 1 year. I worked in corporate for 1 year. I worked in an IT company in 1990 to 1991. So well before Y2K, it was a very small industry then. When I look back, and those were the formative kind of things. And then, in a sense, those experiences repeated. But fundamentally, what defined it was, I think, choosing what you like to do. I think chasing your passion is a very overrated term. I think people keep saying chase your passion. I never knew what my passion was. I knew I was passionate about something, but I think you need to give yourself time, experiment a bit, do the things that you enjoy, and then make choices for yourself. So like this guy was saying that you'll be in a factory, but your batchmates are doing roles in corporate office. I was like, so what? They're doing their own thing. I'm doing my own thing, and I know I'm getting into a factory a little later in my career than most people are. So I think it's important to be clear, make your own choices that work for you, and then pursue an independent path, because at some point in time I decided that I would work in industrial relations for a while. For more, at a time when most people were switching into, let's say, mainline, within quotes, HR careers, I said I'd do industrial relations because that's what I like doing. I want to be in factories, I want to work with workmen, I want to be in rural India. So I did that, and then at some point in time I said, okay, I want to head HR, but I don't want to be in management and maintenance mode. I want to create a function from scratch. I got that opportunity, so I jumped at it, and I kept doing it after that in different size and scale. So I think at the end of the day, when I go back home every day, do I feel I've completed all the work for the day? Not necessarily. But do I feel happy about what I did? Yes, I do. I feel satisfied about what I did. So I think those are some of the things that I think define success. Of course, and the thing is that it's all for me internal metrics. It's what are you passionate about? What really makes meaning for you right now? What brings a smile to your face? What would really excite you and make you think you've done something good? And I think it's important to choose intrinsic markers, because the moment you choose extrinsic markers, you get stuck. So is it money? There'll always be someone earning more than you. Is it a title? There'll always be someone, you'll get the title. So when you become a head, you think a VP sounds better. When you become a VP, you think a president sounds better, and so on. All these are extrinsic markers, and they don't stay with you, and they don't give you satisfaction for very long. Not to me, at any rate. So I think from an individual point of view, these are the important things that have made a big difference to my choices, and I think to where I am now.
Fantastic. So that's, what I can spot is it's the difference that makes the difference. And you were quite open to different experiences, and also without any judgment whatsoever. And that's probably the message that the audience can take away, take on new learnings. We've been emphasizing and overemphasizing on the fact of getting out of your comfort zone. Don't get married to things that are just that seem very obvious and very comfortable, because that's where the growth element really lies. And of course, in your career trajectory, what I see is, like you mentioned as well, you were looking at setting up a HR function from the scratch, or be it reducing costs by absolute 15%. So I think on that note, Samir, I'd like you to share and shed some light on one or two such high-stake situations from a HR lens, and how you navigated through them to create a positive business impact.
If you take that example of 0 man days lost, one is, when I look back on it, it was an ambitious, audacious kind of statement. I don't think anyone believed it, initially at least. And to be honest, the first time I said it out loud to myself, even I was like, are you kidding? How are you going to do this? So I said, well, what if it fails? You'd have tried something that no one in this country has ever tried before, and maybe you'll help the function, they'll know what not to do in future. As happens in these cases, you have people who believe in you, people who don't believe in you, and people who are sitting on the fence. That is a test of the influencing skills that any leader needs to have. You need to carry people along with you. You need to make sure that you need to address every argument. I think some people have logical, construct arguments. I mean, this doesn't make sense to me. This convince me with logic. There are others who have arguments in terms of what's in it for me. How do I benefit? And it need not be a selfish benefit. So it's not someone coming and saying, how do I personally benefit from this? But how does it make me look? Will I gain or lose credibility by associating with something like this, and so on? And I think that there was a great deal of work that I had to do around that as the leader of the team. I think every possible communication channel that I could use, and with every frequency, I kept hammering out the same message: do this, do this, do this. To some people also took it on blind faith and said that we don't quite understand the logic of what you're saying, but because you're saying it, we do it, we trust you. And I think that was another learning, that the leaders need to be trusted, because if you don't trust your leader, then it's not good. If you're not trusted as a leader, what you want is not going to happen. But you also need to be able to say, don't worry, do what I'm telling you, will be all right. So for some time I used to go back home every evening and say, gosh, I hope I hope what I'm saying is the truth. I hope I know what I'm doing, because you don't really have markers and you're doing something completely new. You're like, okay, it might work, it might not work. But at the very least, it will take 6 months, 9 months before you start seeing the results of what you're doing. And people are on edge. In that time, people are on edge. You need to do that. So the other was, of course, again, and this is a completely different example. We developed an IT tool in-house to map capabilities, skills and capabilities of people, and then use that data to develop career plans, succession plans, growth plans, training and development plans for people, and so on. I don't code. I manage IT projects. I lead IT projects, but I don't understand coding. But I had this young guy in my team who was very passionate about IT and IT in HR, and I explained the idea to him, and he said, yeah, and we worked on it together, and we said that it's something worth chasing, something worth doing, and he just went out and started doing it. Now, obviously, doing it means taking time, and people notice when time goes. So times when a couple of my peers and bosses would ask me, "So what's this guy up to? We don't get so much productivity out of him." That was a more collaborative and I think eyebrows raised kind of approach, because no one had ever heard of IT being used not in HR but in industrial relations. And this is really hitting blue collar as well. Took about 6 months to get done finally, but rolled out and results started flowing in about 12 months or so. And then it was out of the blue. They said, "Okay, you've done great work in India. How would you like to do it across the world?" And I said, "Sure, why not?" I said, "What about Switzerland?" I said, "What about it?" I was like, "Okay, let's go." So that's how it works. So they did the global role in Switzerland, then did a country role in Sri Lanka, then did a regional role or an international role based in Dubai. So you can't be very linear, very structured, this must happen by this date. Well, it won't happen. But you have that much of flexibility to take something on and say, "I can live with this, I can work with this."
So we're going to move on to Samir in the light of the context today is guiding lights, and you said I quote, "Leadership is about creating leaders and empowering others," unquote. So in today's theme of guiding lights, who have been your guiding lights, and what have been some of the lifelong lessons that you've taken from them?
Yeah, there have been quite a few, and I think quite a few whom I've respected for each for a different reason. Mahatma Gandhi is a personal idol, again for the audacity to dream of something very different and stick by it, and stake everything on it. That's something that I look forward to very much. I think my father, my parents, in fact, very early on told me that you can do whatever you want, but be the best at it. That's not to say they didn't have expectations. They did have their expectations, of course, but they were always very empowering in how they approached the whole question of what I was going to do with my life and with my career. I think there are some professors who've worked with me in my BCom, and I think impacted me far more beyond my studies. I think beyond the academics of what they taught. They were again people who engaged as people and encouraged in me a love of debating, a love of argument, a love of communication, and developing as a whole person, rather than just saying get your act together on this subject or on that subject. There have been some wonderful people I've worked with in a lifetime, and I would definitely call out T. Shankar, who was retired as a director on the in the consulting company I worked in. There is Praveen Dave, who was the head of employee relations again, and one of my bosses. There have been ex-bosses. There have also been some absolutely brilliant professors and lecturers at XLRA Jamshedpur, who were very, very, I think, very passionate about this subject. And I think it's from them that I get the sense of, you must really do something that moves you, something that really makes you feel completely passionate and empowered in what you are doing. One of my professors told me long back, "Let me catch you. I want to catch you doing something good. I want to catch you doing something right." And I think that's the approach I've always taken to the people around me. So I can tell you what I've learned from you. I can tell you what I've learned from the people around me, and I don't necessarily go around looking for that person can't work with me because this is great about this person. I look at that and say, "Gosh, I wish I was a little bit more like that," whoever it is and whatever it is. So I think at one level it is, yes, there are icons, there are idols, there are people whom I look up to. At another level, it's like there is so much to pick up from everyone around you. What you can do different and what you can do better, and it does make a difference.
Thanks so much for sharing that. And clearly, so there's lots to learn from every life that you're interfacing and interacting with. I remember in the NLP context, neuro linguistic programming, they say if you can spot it, you've got it yourself. So it's essentially really modeling the excellence that any one person or anybody that you may be working back with. So I'm going to move on to HR trends, discussing HR trends with you. And of course, HR is kind of emerged as a robust pillar in helping organizations reassessing and strategizing the use of and the impact of the human variable. There are new HR trends that are clearly emerging. To name a few, like the hybrid working, we've been speaking enough and more about it, or prioritizing employee experience quotient, or be it upskilling employees, having a visibility of what skills are going to look like, and really focusing on employee development. Also, emergence of HR analytics to drive decisions related to people's strategy based on data. Samir, what is that one HR trend that you closely follow and you'd like to share with the audience as well?
IT. That's what's happening in the space of technology in HR, and to me, it's quite ironic because someone like Alvin Toffler in the 1980s said that the future of organizations is going to be high tech plus high touch, and that was the phrase that he used, and he actually predicted quite a bit of what I'm seeing happening nowadays. A futurologist, basically. High tech plus high touch is what fascinates me. So what you see today is a combination where you have high tech at play in terms of artificial intelligence, in terms of a lot of technology based interventions supporting the employee experience, which is very personal and very individual. So it fascinates me to see how those two play with each other, and how advances in technology can support making the work experience more personal, more individual oriented. There is something around strategic partnering, there is something around change agency, interpretation of strategy, all that is true. But I think the way HR is changing the nature of the game now and getting a space in the at the strategic table now, and I think has three or four different pillars to it. And the first of it, which I would definitely call out, is employee experience. In the employee life cycle, how does an employee experience the organization? How does the employee experience you? And how do you make it personal to the employee? This is what this organization means to you, and this is what you get from being in this organization. Rather than, so when I look back, it used to be a very template driven kind of process, right? Okay, so you join this company, you join us because salaries are good, careers are good, development opportunities are there, and in 20 years you'll become a general manager or a VP or whatever it is, depending on which organization it is. And I think increasingly you have an entire generation of people entering the workforce who are saying, hey, I'd like you to listen to me. Even if my aspirations strike you as being similar to those of the person next to me, I don't want you to come in saying that this is how I'm going to manage your career for the next 5 years. Or this is what I'm going to be doing for the next 7 years, but I want something that works for me. And I think that's the first challenge in terms of developing a strategic edge and sitting at the table. The second is simply understanding the business, regardless of which business it is. I think HR people need to get out there. If it's a manufacturing and selling business, get into the market and get into the factory. If it's IT, get into where the coders sit. If it's services, get into where the interaction with the customers happen. If it's a hotel, for example, stand at the front desk for a while and see what happens. Stand at the reception and see what happens for a while. And then convert that into numbers. If you don't push yourself to get out of your comfort zone and get into each of these, that's your call. The third thing, I think the third capability that drives the strategic edge in HR nowadays is all about, I'll put it as artificial intelligence, but the base is IT. Whether it's cloud computing, or whether it's server-based ERPs, or whether it's getting onto AI in recruitment, AI in induction, or the employee query experience on AI and so on. But how quickly do you adapt to technology? How quickly do you get technology on board is going to be the third big key driver of getting to the strategic table. And lastly, I think it's about being able to see ahead of the curve. And that's increasingly difficult in today's world because the future is becoming shorter.
I think that was really helpful in terms of a very clear path and clear steps in the way that HR can play a strategic role, Samir. And I think in line with what you said, and also in terms of what is happening right now in the age of, I would like to say, great reset, employees and hyper personalization. And like you said, companies and organizations have to start rethinking about what they can offer to the employee in terms of employee value proposition. So it might be a good idea to also ponder a little bit on this aspect of how can we propose for organizations to evolve and strengthen their employee value proposition, especially towards laying the focus on employee rewards and recognitions, benefits, which are very current right now, which is a subject that we really need to ponder upon. So, any best practices also, if you can mention?
I think, I think one of the key abilities or the key differentiators of of organizational success in culture is how much are you listening to your employees? How much are your employees actually communicating with you, or do they communicate with you when they resign? And I think that's also the great resignation is upon us. I think regardless of which part of the world you're in. I don't underestimate the utility of things like engagement surveys, workplace surveys, information, and so on. But I'm far more in favor of either using online check-in tools or daily surveys, or whenever people log on to a system, you just tap out how you're feeling for the day. And I think for leaders to walk out into the workplace and take a look, what's the atmosphere in the place like, what's the expression, what does the expression on people's face tell you? Are people happy working here? Are they engaged? Are they productive? Reward is important. I think I won't be so idealistic as to say that it doesn't matter. But I think a lot more is around what kind of feedback do you get? What kind of recognition do you get? Do you get called out in public for doing work well? Or do you get called out in public for doing work badly? As a leader, how do you balance out the two? Because part of the leadership imperative is to tell people when things are not going well and to help them course correct, but also help them confront the reality. But to me, the criticality lies around how much do you communicate, how much do you listen, and how often do people talk to you. The more fora you set up for communication and feedback of this sort, the easier it is to keep making changes in your culture and going on as you move forward. I mean, there's a reason why it's called change. It's never going to be, you're never, even in an ideal world, you're never going to be in a situation where everyone comes to you and says, what are we going to change today? Yeah, there will be resistance to change. When you want to do something now, there will be a mass that says all right, another group that says not at all, and a third group that says, are you sure what you know what you're doing? Maybe a fourth group which says, let me wait and watch whether it works or not. As the pace of change picks up, you need to carry people along with you, you need to carry this entire group along with you. But if you don't know what is wrong and what is it that you need to change towards, then that's not going to happen either. So that to me is critical. It's around listening and communication at the workplace. We as corporates become more sensitive and more inclusive. I think we're beginning to call out I think at an aggregate level, we're beginning to call out greater amounts of sensitivity and inclusion in the workplace. And that's a form of recognition as well, to recognize that there are in-groups and out-groups, and how do you bring together to create a more inclusive workplace. But at the individual level, there have been handouts, spot recognition cards. The same thing as my prof once upon a time said, I want to catch you doing something good. So when you catch someone doing something good, then you immediately recognize, make a hero or a heroine out of that person, have a lot of conversations around what is going right, what is going wrong. We've used surveys, we've used pulse surveys. I haven't yet led the, one of my own passions is to be at the forefront of installing a system where everyone checks in once or twice, once or even more in a day in terms of how they're feeling. I'd just like to know what kind of rippling it causes across the organization when you start getting live feedback of that sort. Somewhere the larger macro form of recognition is also growth in your career. It's also growth and I think a lot of people look forward to that. You need to again balance this out a bit. It's not all transactional recognition and then 5 years later the person, or 2 years later the person turns around and says, all this is great, but where am I going? Where am I going in this organization and what's happening? So I think you need to balance out the short term with the long term as well. It is pointless to say that you've got a great career here, now don't bother me with requests for feedback on what happened yesterday. But it's equally pointless to say that I'm hugely transactional and I don't know what's happening in the medium term. So I think again it comes to me back about balance and making sure that everything is in play.
Right, thank you. So, with all that hard talk, I think it's time for us to move into the final segment of our conversation. So, what is that one advice that you'd like to give to the HR professionals that's an absolute must do?
Get your hands dirty. do what needs to be done, do different things, do them fast, fail fast. If something doesn't work, don't get obsessed with it, just drop it and move
All right. And finally, what is your sign off line?
on. I contain multitudes. It's a quote from Walt Whitman. That's my sign. And it's on my Facebook profile as well. I contain multitudes.
That's filled with profundity, if I may say so. All right. So thank you so much, Samir. It's been an absolute
Thank you.
pleasure having you on the Guiding Light series by Zaggle. It was
Thank you.
absolutely
Thank you so
lovely
much.
to
Been great
interact and chat with you.
interacting with you as well, Payal, and all the best. Yes, bye.